Mhm.
Hey guys, welcome back to Startups with Seoul. We're a podcast series about Korean startup ecosystem, and I'm CK, and here we have Avi and Jiho, and
Hey,
we're so excited about today because Jiho has so much knowledge about the Korean startup ecosystem by now. He's leading Antler Korea, and obviously, we'll let you introduce yourself, but we're longtime friends, and I
mhm.
still remember back in the day we grabbed like Chinese meal in Mountain View, and
Yeah,
When
that's
was
something
that?
like that's
it's a long
something like
time ago.
10, 11 years ago, something like
Wow.
that, right?
Wow.
It was in 2011 or 10. I can't remember. So it's
Wow.
it's quite a while ago. Yeah,
Yeah,
You
yeah,
guys are
10,
old.
11.
yeah.
So yeah, so super excited to have you here today. So why don't you start by introducing yourself and what you do at Antler Korea, please?
hmm Yeah. So as you introduced, my name is Jiho. I mean, to start from the beginning, I was born in Korea. My family moved to the States when I was about 4 or 5. So I grew up in Texas and then in California until I was probably 12 or 13 years old. So I grew up as like more of an American kid before the family moved back to Seoul. And that's when I just finished middle school, high school here in Korea. It was kind of like a pretty hard landing uh, for me, but I guess at the end it kind of worked out because I kind of feel like I'm not, well, I mean, my friends kind of make fun of me because they think that I'm not truly like Korean. But then I have like other friends that say you're not really an American kid and like you're kind of this weird in between. But I kind of think I've come to appreciate that I kind of am able to at least understand like, both sides. So I also did college in Korea, and I think when I was like much when I was in early on, I kind of decided that I didn't really want to work at a company, like just a normal company. Where in Korea, if you're maybe graduating from college, one of like the the companies that you would want to work for would probably be Samsung or Hyundai, like one of the bigger companies, especially when I was graduating from school. Like I didn't really want to do that. Maybe it was kind of part of the fact that I felt that I didn't fully fit in to the Korean
Mm.
culture. And it's that plus I was super interested in a lot of the stuff that I was able to do using a computer, like sitting in my room. So I got into like uh, building websites in like the late 90s, and I thought it was just really cool that I was able to like build something, put it up on the web, and then have random people like come visit and like, kind of give feedback. And that was just kind of a really awesome and novel thing to me. And I kind of felt like, hey, like it kind of be cool if I was able to do that for a living. And that's kind of how I kind of fell into this entrepreneurial journey. And fast forward, like I did maybe 2 or 3 startups in Korea. There wasn't a lot of venture capital going into tech in Korea back in the day, especially early stage. So a lot of it was funded by the government actually, but didn't work out too great. And maybe I think I was maybe like 26 and I felt, oh shit, I'm getting like old now. What am I gonna do? Like I have to graduate school, I have to get like a real job. What am I gonna do? And I had like maybe 1 or 2 semesters left before I had to finish school, and I just decided, hey, all right, why don't I just go to Silicon Valley, go to California, and see what's there. I didn't really have much of a plan. It was just like a 2 or 3 month trip, and then I kind of um, had to get Juan, who was my previous co-founder, and like a lot of the previous startups that we tried to build. I had to kind of convince him to come with me. So it's like, all right, so we don't have anything much better to do, and we finish school, we're gonna have to get real jobs anyway. So like, why don't we just, all right, let's go, just meet a bunch of people and see what happens. So I ended up, getting together with two co-founders from Seattle, and ended up starting building like this. At first, it was like a language learning platform that would connect like English speaking college students with peers with non like English speaking countries,
Mm.
which is
Like
pretty common now, but
Italki and
yeah.
it's like Italki, right? And these kind
Mhm.
of platforms.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's a lot more common now, but back then it was kind of novel. I mean, we didn't even have like I mean, back then the iPhones didn't even have a front-facing camera. So you'd have to like buy like a camera, plug it into your computer and kind of go through this like really weird scheduling process. But again, started building that, didn't work, so we had to pivot away from that and started building a different like asynchronous social platform that allowed you to kind of connect with friends in other countries. And that's when, I met up with Chang at 500 because we were part of the 500 startups, now 500 globals first batch. Got a little
So
bit of
you guys were
investment
part of the
from them.
very first batch, right?
Yeah,
Very first batch.
exactly.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
still remember. So I was at Google, and then this is the
Mhm.
time when like Dave McClure would come out, and after the demo day, he would
Right.
actually like sing,
Yeah.
karaoke, right? So
Hmm.
yeah, fun days.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's when I met Chang. You were my mentor or our mentor for our team. And that's how we got to know each other. And I think that experience, like trying to do like several different startups in Seoul and coming to Silicon Valley was kind of like was really refreshing for me because within Korea, what I really struggled with, there were a lot, well, I mean, Korea is a very homogenous culture. And when you have a lot of people that are kind of similar and like, kind of think a similar way and have like similar experiences, they kind of tend to look at something from like a specific angle. And when I was younger, I heard a lot of people they tell me, hey, like you should do it a specific way and not another way. Whereas when I came to the Valley, everyone had their own way of doing things, and there wasn't really a right or wrong way of approaching a problem. So you'd have founders that are approaching a problem from a completely different angle than another founder that's trying to work on the same thing. And no one would actually say which approach was right or wrong. They're just different. And you just have to like, push through and like see what happens. So for me, that I think that got rid of a lot of the anxiety that was around, oh, am I doing it wrong? Oh, I'm like supposed to be like this startup founder and like what is kind of the right way of doing this versus the wrong way of doing this. But I think that experience kind of
So you just like, put everything down on
yeah,
the field, and then
exactly.
you're just like, hey, let's
Mhm.
push everything we can do, and
Right,
then
right.
so that
And
doesn't leave any regrets. Yeah.
exactly. And it also comes down to like we had it was me and I had two other co-founders. And it also comes down to what our capabilities were as a team. So depending on what type of capabilities your founding team has and what the chemistry is, like you have to kind of use that to your advantage and
Right.
approach problems in a specific way because you have that skill set or
Play to your
chemistry.
strengths. Play to your
Yeah,
strengths. So
exactly.
so actually that's an interesting point. So do you think because I feel like I see a lot of that in Korea. I mean,
Hmm.
do you feel like Korean startups have this expectation that there's a right path, a right way to
Yes,
do it, and
definitely.
right, and like there's a
Yeah,
right answer. You have to
exactly.
right, which we know is not true. Like that's not even remotely true.
Yeah,
That doesn't
yeah.
even make sense
Right,
logically
right.
when you think about it, right?
Hmm.
So like how so now and now I mean and I'm sorry to cut you off in the middle of like your journey,
Hmm.
um to just drill down on this point specifically. So now you meet Korean founders, right? I mean,
Hmm.
you're gonna talk about Antler in a minute, I'm
Yeah.
sure. How do you dissuade them from this idea that there's like, so it happened to you, right? Because you were
Yeah,
exposed to others, but
right, right.
how can you, like, how can we do it on a larger scale?
So um, I can fast forward a little bit. So to get to this point, so I came back to Korea, or sorry, I did eventually come back to Korea. The startup that I was building, they got 500 invested. Eventually didn't work out. Sad story. We'll come back to it. But afterwards, I started another company with a guy named Robin called Sumgo. Sumgo went through YC, and when I was in YC, so we're back in the Valley now. The YC partners would kind of introduce us to like different advisors and mentors there. And we would ask like several mentors like their take on a specific problem that we were having in terms of marketing and like user acquisition. Every person like kind of gave a different answer.
Right.
And this is like YC, like
Hmm.
I mean, for me, back in the days, like, oh, like these are the oracles that have all the right answers, and I go to them each one and like kind of ask them the same question. It's like, oh, you should do that. Some person says, no, you should do this, and it's all different. So I think that's another point when I figured out, oh, like, yeah, there isn't a right answer to approaching a problem. The only thing that I could do is like kind of absorb a lot of the feedback that the people around me are giving me, and I have to be responsible and come up with a plan, a solution, and a resolution, and again push forward and like kind of take responsibility for that. So that again, big thing. How do you do that at scale? Well, at least in at Antler, I mean, I'll get to Antler and what we're doing in a second, but so we have 3 partners here. So I'm working with 2 other partners, and we also have regular office hours with our founders. And we also deliberately don't comment on the other partners' like advice to the same team. So I can give specific advice, but say Gabriel, my other partner, can give contradicting advice on the same issue to the founder. And I think at first it's a bit confusing to them, but we also remind them, hey, I don't know everything. This is my take on it based on my experience. It may or may not be wrong. Gabriel has his own take on it, may or may not be wrong. But
Sure.
look, we're not building the business for you. You are building your business.
Mhm.
We are giving you feedback. Please, pay attention to the feedback and kind of absorb it, but you have to make it your own and come up with your own solution.
Yeah, it's like one of many signals, right? Potentially
Yeah.
there could be other signals, like obviously, users and customers, right? I mean, they might have their own feedback,
Exactly.
which arguably would be more important than like advisors' feedback. So I think like good founders are using all of this as a like signal that's like coming in, and then they
Right.
need to like, process it. And then, but one good thing about like these is it becomes like a spurring moment. It's like a thought-provoking, kind of thing, right? So like
Yeah.
advice comes in, and then, oh yeah, that's really interesting. Then what you do next is like you start kind of thinking about, get the thinking machine going, right? So
Yeah. So
so
that's
after YC, go ahead, sorry.
oh no, that's kind of that was my take on it. But to kind of finish up the story, sadly, like the it was called Wander. Wander was an app that kind of helped you connect with people in different countries. That almost got a follow-up investment from IC, but sadly didn't. I'd come back. I was in massive credit card debt, so like knee deep in credit card debt. So I had to get rid of that first. So I had to get a real job.
So
So
what happened?
go
What
ahead.
happened with the follow-up investment from YC? Can you tell us?
So I mean, we went through the interview, and they really liked us because I was the CTO of that company, and the CEO, Darian, his YC video, like the video you have to upload when you apply to YC, he took it from his car. And the video was basically saying, hey, I've been living out of my car for the past 3 months because I really want this to work. And like, we have a bunch of users. They're very loyal and we're growing. Retention is good. Like, I think like you should, like YC, you should kind of consider us for your program, we went into the interview, and I think the one reason that we didn't really make the cut was that we didn't pay enough attention to how we were going to monetize it, right? So we were, and again, I know better now, but this is like 10, 13 years ago. Back then it was like, oh, grow, grow, grow. You got to get more users, got to get more users. And again, this is like, I was using probably like an iPhone 3GS or an iPhone 4. It's like way back. And we didn't pay too much attention to how we were going to monetize it. And when that question came up, we just weren't able to answer it. So I'm pretty sure that was the reason that we didn't make the cut. But yeah.
So after that, you come back to Korea, get some real jobs to pay off your debt.
Yeah.
And then you know, you
And then
did
it's
like
Sumgo.
right, and Sumgo, and then you worked at went into like crypto a little bit, right? If I remember correctly.
So Sumgo, by the way, is a service, a platform that basically helps local professional service providers get customers. And there's a similar service in the US called thumbtack.com, which is basically we benchmarked Thumbtack from the beginning to build it out. I went through YC with Sumgo, and then a little after, like post Series A, I got really excited about crypto because I've been looking at it since I've been looking at crypto since 2012 or 2013, if I remember correctly. It was kind of like this novel thing that I knew existed and kind of was interesting to me, but I didn't really think about it as a business until like 2017. So I started another business in 2018 that was basically trying to build like a stable coin, like a price stable coin that was kind of pegged to the currency of South Korea, like the Korean won. We did one seed round, and then we were at a point where we wanted to raise like a pre-A a year and a half in, but eventually we approached Binance, who is there's a lot of news around Binance right now, but that I won't get into. But we approached Binance for investment, and they just offered us, hey, why don't you just join the Binance ecosystem? Let's get your like Korean won stable token onto the Binance platform and have it like trade and grow from there. And like at the point, we weren't really sure if we wanted to sell, but I think the founders got together and say, hey, like we want to make the product that we were building succeed, and if Binance can kind of help us do that, it doesn't really matter which flag that we're actually that we have. So I did that, and then I was the country manager for the Binance in Korea for about a year and a half before.
So you kind of exited. It was kind of like,
yeah,
was it an acqui-hire plus?
Yeah, I mean, I would say it's an acqui-hire plus a little bit of an incentive, but it wasn't like a massive exit.
Right.
By then, oh, by the way, so when I was leaving Sumgo, I had to like kind of offload about half the shares that I had in that. So I did have like a mini exit with Sumgo going into crypto, and then Binance happened. So then I was with Binance for a while until Binance also realized that it's really tough to get through to the Korean financial regulators, which again, they're having trouble with around the world. So again, I decided this is gonna be a tough cookie to crack, and Binance isn't willing to like fund it anymore. So I eventually had to leave, and now I'm at Antler. Antler, let me get into it, is a global VC. We're in like 27 or 28 offices around the world. I lose count. We've invested into 1,000 companies in the past 5 or 6 years. We've started investing in Korea since last year, but I've been working here for about 2.5 years now. And what we're doing is basically we're investing earlier than, let's say, your typical YC. And what that means is like if you want money from like a seed institutional VC investor, like you usually need to have like a team a product and like kind of some sort of proof as to why your product actually has like demand in the market. But what we do is like we recruit individual founders that are at the very beginning of their entrepreneurial journey. So you have to start somewhere, and that's usually just yourself making up your mind to quit your job and like, start a business. So that's when we kind of recruit these founders to work with us. I actually have like 80 founders in the other room. And what they do, we bring them together in it's full time, no side hustling. Like you have to quit your job to come in. And we try to get them to form teams and then build a strong business case and have some sort of minimum validation within 12 weeks. So it's quite a tight schedule, which I think works well because we really push these people to the limits. And we end up investing in about a third of them per batch. So it's because you're in the program doesn't guarantee that you would get investment. It's basically a platform
Are
to
the
help
companies
you.
like physically co-located? I mean, do they work from the same
Yeah,
office space?
exactly. Yeah. So they all
Yeah,
come in,
yeah.
or at least for Korea, that's the case. Everyone comes in Monday through Friday, and then if they're hustlers, they'll actually like kind of bring their sleeping bags and kind of like sleep on the floor. But
Yeah.
that's kind of like the pressure cooker environment that we're trying to create to really push them to
Yeah, I think it'll
to
be like a very interesting dynamic there, right? I mean, I never
right.
visited, but like I can
Hmm.
almost imagine like, you walk into the office and then there's like all
Yeah.
the other
Oh,
teams like
I
Yep.
hustling,
visited, and
keep them
it's
around.
like super full of energy. It's
Yeah.
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 Someone is sleeping on the floor and
Hmm. No, that's
Yeah.
kind of what we're going for.
yeah.
But again, like, I mean, the founders have to go through this process anyway. You have to
Yeah.
meet people, you have to talk to them, you have to kind of get your co-founder or to be co-founder to join your team. You're going to go through several iterations because everyone says your idea sucks, and then you end up on something that you think might work. And then you go to your customers, and then maybe you talk to 5 customers that have a very high willingness to actually pay for what you're doing. And then they come into our IC and then we'll invest in say 100 to 150K. And then they'll spend the ones that do get investment will spend another 3 months with us before they graduate. And when they graduate, we want them to be at a stage where they're ready to raise money from, say, your typical YC
VCs.
stage investor. Yeah.
Hmm.
Right.
How do like teams get formed? I mean, like you guys are like letting in individual founders, and then
Yeah.
do you see like,
Yeah.
some people raise their hand and then, hey, I have this awesome idea, and then like the rest of the people join, or how does it work?
It's actually not too like complicated. During the first like 6 weeks, what we basically do is we get them to do like these hackathons, like these 48-hour hackathons twice every week. So if it's a month, you're doing 8 hackathons,
Wow.
48-hour hackathons, and again, it's intense. But it's a really good opportunity to kind of
Hmm.
match up with different people in your batch. And then you can kind of, brainstorm different business ideas, uh, like 8 different ideas if you wanted to. And at the end of each hackathon, like myself and the partners would go in and like we kind of critique them or, give them a lot of pressure as to why
Yeah.
we think that idea sucks. And
Yeah.
they go through
So
that like
you guys
eight
get to be
times, 12 times.
like
Yeah.
Simon Cowell
The
and
Hell's
Yeah.
just,
Kitchen.
yeah, Hell's
Yeah.
Kitchen.
Basically. Yeah. And you see a dramatic change from week 1 to like week 8 to week 12 because if you constantly are thinking about, how you're going to make this work, who your customer is, and if you're constantly getting feedback not only from like the partners, but if you're constantly getting feedback from your other fellow batchmates as well as to why they think your idea sucks,
Right.
why it won't work. And if you're constantly kind of in that mode, you get better at it. You get better at
Yeah.
it. You get better at it week over week. And in that process, you also get to know who your batchmates are, and like you get to communicate who you are. And at around like the 8 to 12 week mark, they will kind of come to a decision as to who they think they want to work with, they'll get together, and then they'll actually start drilling down on a very specific problem that they want to solve.
Interesting.
I mean, so when I visited there, I think I really felt the energy. I mean, there's so much creative energy there, and also what was interesting to me is I felt like all the teams they appreciated feedback so much. So they were, I think you conditioned them
Yeah,
how important feedback is, which is like I think it's underrated. I think most startups they see feedback as something negative in some ways, because the feedback you usually get is you pitch to an investor, and if they say yes, then you get the money, and if they say no, then you get the feedback. So
exactly.
so it's like feedback is always correlated with something bad happened. So I got feedback, right? But
so
what I felt in Antler is it was the opposite. Like they were craving like, okay, like what am I missing here? What am I doing wrong? How,
and that's again in the early weeks. So every time we get a new batch, like everyone is like super stressed when they get negative feedback. And I think again, like to your point, it's really important you get used to it, because you're going to get a lot of no's in your like entrepreneurial journey. A lot of people are going to tell you that your idea sucks, and they don't tell you why. Your customers, like your potential investors, just people are going to tell you it's not going to work, and it sucks. If you are used to getting that feedback, then it doesn't bother you anymore. And you're able to like
in fact,
actually understand and internalize
the best startups that I know, the best growth hackers are addicted to feedback, right? They want these data points, because that's how you figure out which path is the correct one. So
I mean, for these founders to go through this program, right? So sounds like before the investment, so you do the demo day and then like commit the investment. So until then, there's no like investment coming in, and then you're requiring everybody to be full-time founders through this program. So like the first like 3 months, how do like people get by? I mean, do they need to like think about, hey, like I need to have a 3 months of personal runway before doing this, or
well, I mean, if you think about it, like even for me, when I quit, so before I worked on Sumgo, I was working at Coupang. So when I was working at Coupang, I was making 6 figures and pretty comfortable. But I quit Coupang to work on Sumgo with Robin, and I was paid maybe 20% of what I used to be making.
Right.
And like that's the hard facts of life. Like if you want to start something, you have to make sacrifices. So like I sold off my car, I moved into like a smaller apartment, and then you start eating ramen instead of like something a bit more maybe tasty. That's just you have to hustle. That's how you do it. It's the same for the founders that are coming in. Like we tell them, hey, like if are you serious about building a business? We can't like support you financially, and because it's your business, and if you're really serious about building it, you would be eating ramen even if you weren't in the batch regardless, right? So we do provide them with a little bit of a stipend though. Maybe in the US it's probably like $700 a month for the first 3 months only. And again, it's just a little bit of a leg up for them so that they don't starve to death.
That's almost like that's just Shin Ramen. That's not even like that
exactly
like a restaurant.
Exactly. So they won't be able to support themselves fully on that. They're gonna have to figure out a way how they're gonna make it work. And it's different for every founder, but they figure it out, they come, and that's kind of how they get started.
Let's talk about the Korean startup. So but as Antler's international program, you have like 26, 27 different offices. So from your point of view, do you get to like see how other Antler programs in other countries are doing? And then does it give you opportunity to kind of compare Korean startups versus like other startups in other countries?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, all of the partners around the world gather once or twice a year. So like we kind of get together at a specific location physically to kind of discuss what they've been working on, in their respective regions, which portfolios are doing well, which aren't, what has worked well and what hasn't. And everyone constantly has like access to a database of all of the investments that we've made. And again, it's a constant learning process as to especially for us, we get to benchmark, say, Singapore or Australia or parts of Europe, certain offices in Europe that have been operating for maybe 2 or 3 years longer than we have. And they've gone through kind of this whole cycle. And there are different things that work in specific regions and don't. And also for the founders, like the profile of the founders may be different in a specific region. For instance, in Europe, like they're super gung-ho about carbon and
Yeah.
and like how in the environment and energy. And then that's different from the founders that say want to build something in B2B SaaS in, say, the US, or something in security in the US, or something in fintech in the US. Like the profile of founders, I think is the difference in profile of founders is pretty interesting. So yeah, we do kind of look at that a lot.
I mean,
So what
aside from, I was gonna say, like, aside from like the profiles and like the which
Mhm.
vertical most companies come from or developing, do you see, like, from your observation, like personally speaking, do you see Korean founders like different traits? It's like, hey, what is
Oh,
good about Korean founders, and
mhm.
what can Korean founders can
versus the
do
other
better?
Antlers, versus the other
Yeah,
Antlers,
yeah,
especially.
yeah.
So I think Korean founders have a lot of hustle. Like the level of hustle is up there, like on the top. Like I told you that our founders would say, like, they get, like, the people that like running would get together in the morning to go out for a morning run before they come in. Thankfully, we have like shower facilities in our building, so like they take a run, they shower, and then they get ready for the day. And then uh, for the founders that say live out in the suburbs of Seoul, like it may take them like two hours to commute here. We also have like sleeping areas, not only on, I mean, some of them sleep on the floor here, but like in the other floors, we actually have sleeping quarters. So like, they just be constantly here in hustling. So that is different from, say, I think different offices in Europe, where I think they are much more cautious about how they split their time
Right.
and try to optimize how they can use the time that they've allocated to doing something versus their non-founder time. So I've definitely seen that as a difference. But I guess what one of the I don't know if this is, again, this is probably something that's not good and needs to be worked on for the Korean founders is, again, we discussed this earlier. They think there's a right way to do things and a wrong way to do things, which is not the case. So like in the early days, you have to kind of really break that preconception that there's a right and wrong way of doing things. There is not a right or wrong way of doing things. There's only like your way of doing things. And that might make you successful, it might not, but you kind of have to suck it up and
And play to your strength, like you said,
yeah,
like find out what your
exactly,
strengths are, right?
exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I mean, you have a lot of that. You see a lot of founders.
Mm-hmm.
You probably see more founders than any other VC. Because the stage you're at, right? And I mean, intimately see them, not see them for like a 30-minute pitch, but like you get to see like a ton of
Yeah.
founders for a few months. So what are, and I'm sure you've seen patterns, right? So what, I mean, it's a classic question, but I feel like you're uniquely positioned to answer. What makes a certain founder successful?
I think the number one trait is just grit.
Grit.
Like I
Just don't
tell
give
I
up.
tell yeah, I tell my founders, you know Antler won't make you successful. It's just trying to provide you with a little bit of a leg up in your journey. And I've actually had founders that didn't raise money in our batch, right? You know, they would leave the batch without any money, but they wouldn't give up. Like they would keep at it, right? And I have one founder that eventually is now has a microbrewery in Korea, I think. Uh Brewing makgeolli, like the rice wine drink in Korea, and trying to do something in that space. I don't know specifically what she's working on, but again, like don't give up, right? You have to continually push through. Antler is just one of maybe the pieces of your entrepreneurial journey. And just that, again, your business doesn't go bust unless the founder says it goes bust. And I think that's kind of the one trait. It may, if you're lucky, you might be able to get something off the ground within a year. If not, it may take 5 years. But you know, if you're really fixated on getting there, then the only thing that you can really do is not give up, I think.
Actually, that's really interesting, and I agree with you, by the way, because the common conception is like how do startups die? Well, they don't raise funding, or they run out of the runway, or like there's different answers.
Yeah.
But your answer is the correct one. I mean, a founder dies when the founders close it.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
And not 1 minute before, right?
And it doesn't, like, for me at least, like I've done, like I had 5 failed startups, right? And the only thing I regret is not closing them down for another one sooner. And when you're, again, like you may close down a specific entity, you may kind of shut the like close the book on a specific idea, but you as an entrepreneur, or if you're continuously pushing through,
And
like
just
that,
pivot to something else.
it's not over. Yeah.
Just pivot to something else.
Do you see most companies, batch companies, focus on the Korean market, or do you see like how many, like, what, what's the percentage of companies that you see who say, hey, we're going to be developing our product for a global market from the get-go? Yeah, what's the percentage, roughly speaking?
Not too high. Maybe 10%. We have, say, in the second batch, we have a team that specifically went to Vietnam, just like even before they raised capital from us. We have another team in the current batch that is now in Brazil, because one of the founders spent a lot of time in South America, and they're actually there now. I actually had a call with them like just earlier this morning. Couple of teams like that. The rest mostly are starting here domestically, but we do give a lot more like points to the companies that logically can like tell us a story of how it's like scalable on a global scale.
So you're okay with them starting with the domestic market as long as they have like a global plan?
Yeah, well, I mean, this is just my take on it, but if you are, let's say if you're a Korean founder and you want to build, say, a business that where your early customers are going to come from, say, the US. And within the US, let's say it's like, I don't know, maybe it's Texas specifically. If you want to build a business where your customers are in Texas, I really don't think that it's a good idea for you to be in Korea, right? You have to be close to your customers, and you have to kind of understand who your customers are. You have to be able to kind of talk to them frequently. You have to understand the vibe of the environment and the lifestyle that they have for you to kind of come up, I think, with a very strong business plan. And it's really hard to do that if you're in Korea and you're targeting like customers in a different area. So I said, hey, if you want to build a company that is targeting a specific market, then I really think you should go there from the beginning instead of here in Korea. I kind of use this analogy, like, so Robin, my co-founder and the CEO of Sumgo, he was born in Georgia. He's Korean American, but he was born in Georgia. He grew up in Georgia. He finished college in Georgia, and then he came to Korea. And then he came to Korea to build Sumgo. And Sumgo was targeting the Korean market. And again, it's like a professional service matching platform. It would have been really hard for Robin to build that if he was still in Georgia, right? So this may be different for like B2B services, where culture and borders like are maybe less important than like a consumer product. But still, like I think it's really important to be close to your customers, and that's yeah. If there are founders that are in my batch that say, "Hey, I want to do something in Vietnam. I want to do something in Southeast Asia, South America." You should probably go there and like kind of figure out what's going on.
Well, so I mean, the counterpoint to that would be, I mean, I think you're right, but I also think it puts it puts the bar a little high. So if you can, like, ideally, yes, if you can go to Texas, right, and sit there and work, you're gonna do a lot better than if you do it from Seoul. But a lot of people can't. There's a lot of reasons why you might not be able to do that. So then the question becomes, well, what if I can't do that? Like, what's the conclusion? So, and in my opinion, the conclusion is you should still focus on Texas. Just do it. Like, best is go to Texas. Second best is do it from Seoul. Focus on Texas. That's my.
You could, well, then you'd probably in that case, I would probably recommend you need someone on the ground though. So like, let's say you're working on, I don't know, a B2B SaaS, but I mean, I'm sure both of you also agree that ideas aren't that like I mean, anyone could have an idea. And if you have a good idea, there's a really high chance that another founder has also had the same idea and they may be targeting the same market. But let's say you have founder A who's in Texas doing what you're doing, and you have another founder in Seoul that's also doing the same business, targeting the same market. The founder that's in Texas may have a higher chance of achieving success versus the founder that's in Seoul, just because of the fact that they are closer to their customers. So that's kind of how I come for it, unless maybe you have a real technical advantage.
So I mean, look, there's a lot of, my point of view is a little different. So there's a lot of reasons why startups succeed, right? There's a lot of things that go into this pie.
Sure.
A lot, like, we can make like 50 things, right? And like some of the things you just mentioned, so like technical, who's better technically, who's closer to the market, those are all components that come into this pie, right? I think some components are like crucial, like you said, grit. So like grit is like a make it or not, right? But a lot of others are like, I mean, you can, if you're technically better, that's helpful. If you're technically inferior, you can still win. It's like things in the pie. And I feel like this is the case for being in the market. So like being in the market, I mean, yes, if you're there, yes, you have an advantage. But I've seen, I mean, it's more correlated with success, yes. But I've seen a ton of startups that were there and failed for a lot of reasons, for all the other reasons, right? Versus if you're not there. And I think it boils down to and like what you said before, like you have to play to your strengths, right? So if you can pack up your bags and move to your target market, yes, you should absolutely do that. But if you can't, you should not do that and still do the other things that you could do well. I think that's
so I think the common denominator here, the common theme we're talking about here is be close to your customer, right? It can be physical, or it can be even like, in this day and age, information is widely available. So and hopefully there's some sort of playbook that's available somewhere. So yeah, we've been talking about the Monday.com as an example. It's an Israeli company. Whole bunch of people don't even know it's an Israeli company, but the majority of the team is in Israel. So that's the kind of case where, hey, the team is in Israel. They didn't move to Texas or like whatever, but they still understand what it takes to win in the US, / global market, because for Israel in particular, there has been all these like companies that have been doing the same thing. So there's a collective knowledge, aka playbook, available somewhere. So people pick that up. That plus like the whole information is available like completely, transparently. Everybody's reading TechCrunch, everybody's reading like whatever. So yeah, very like flat field. So I think the common theme here is, you got to understand the customer. I mean, it's very clear that if you don't understand the customers, or if you're not like close to the customers, it's very difficult to succeed, right? Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think that you said it's mind share, right? You can achieve it by physically being there, or you can achieve it by thinking a lot about them and interacting with them, right?
No, that is true, which is the reason why I think that we will see a lot, and it's going to be easier to do that. I think Israel may be a bit more different because you have a lot of young people in Israel that have much more international exposure than, say, your typical Korean person, but that's changing now. So one thing that I do say about the Korean ecosystem and how it's changed is, I'm sure Chang, you also know this, but before like the mid 80s, traveling abroad for your typical Korean wasn't something that was normal, right? It was only after like the mid 80s that where international travel actually became something that people normally did. So if you were born prior to, like, say, like if you're born prior to the 70s, your international exposure was probably at a minimum. And that goes for a lot of the successful founders of the larger like tech companies in Korea, same, like your neighbors, your Kakaos. The previous generation, they had much more less international exposure than, say, the founders that are trying to build something now that are millennials and like Gen Z, right? So if you've had the international exposure growing up, and as you became an adult, it's much more natural for you and easier for you to kind of connect with a more international audience than versus when you're just in Korea, right? When you're focusing within Korea. So I don't think there was a specific problem that prevented like Korean entrepreneurs from building global companies. It's just that because of circumstance, the founders of these great companies, like they didn't have like that international exposure that maybe the Israeli founders had, or like founders that in other countries may have had, that allowed them to build and grow international companies.
Right.
But I think that will change over the next 10 years as we see like the millennials and Gen Z founders build new companies. And I think we're already seeing that in like the entertainment sector. I mean, they're not startups, but like, K-culture, K-pop, and like, Korean dramas. The producers and the directors and the writers of, that content are of a different generation than the people that wrote content like, 10 or 15 years prior to them. Right? So, I mean, it is very uniquely Korean, but it also is built in a way where it connects with a more international audience.
Right. And there are also like pockets of tech industry where it's already like very global. Like somebody mentioned crypto, for example, right? Like Web3.
Exactly.
Like the conferences happening in Seoul are very global. And everybody in the crypto industry, it might be like a global thing, like regardless of where we are. It might be Korea, like Thailand, like whatever. People are communicating. Everything is in English. Discord and Twitter. It's very universal and global.
And if you look at a lot of the crypto companies in Korea, like, the founders are like, they are of the millennial age, and they have a lot of international exposure.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a saying by William Gibson, the future is already here. It's just not uniformly distributed. And I feel that's like the example you just gave. I mean, there's these pockets, there's these examples already happening, just it's not distributed, it's not uniformly distributed, and hopefully it will be. But I think the main takeaway is that anyone can do it. I mean, there's really almost no excuse for a startup founder in Korea today not to go after the global business.
Right.
I
So
mean, right? There's like almost any industry, almost. I mean,
yeah.
there are exceptions, but they're exceptions.
Mhm.
Like they're not the general rule, right?
Definitely. And again, like one of the reasons that Antler is in Korea is because Antler kind of understands that great founders can emerge from anywhere, including South Korea. And because of the transformation that South Korea went through over the past like 30 years, over the past 50 years, it's at like a point where like the founders in Korea don't have to, like to your point, Avi, don't have to fly over to Silicon Valley anymore to build like a great business, much more connected. And the 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 companies that are being built here by the next generation are eventually have a very higher chance than the previous generation to build great companies and products and services that have international reach. So the reason why Antler is here, even though everyone says like Korea is such a small market, like why are you there? It's because to kind of go after the founders that will eventually build out these companies that do have international reach.
Personal question. So as somebody, who spent a lot of time in the entrepreneur, as a startup, founder world, and made a
Hmm.
transition into a VC, what kind of changes did you have to make? What kind of transition did you have to make? And if there is like somebody who's thinking about like similar path, hey, I'm in the startup world, but then one day I want to be a VC. Do you have like a one advice for them?
Uh, I I mean I think for if you're an ex-founder that wants to get into VC, definitely like going early stage will probably be more in your comfort zone, especially I think that was true for me. When I first got an offer from Antler, I actually initially rejected them because hey, like I don't really know anything about VC. I don't know how it works. But the guy I was talking to, he convinced me that hey, like very early stage. And when you're early stage and you're in VC, a lot of value comes from just working with the founders and not just the capital, because capital is capital. Doesn't matter if it comes from Sequoia or YC or Antler. Capital is the same. What's different is the value add that the investor is providing that is not capital. And the reason I guess Antler wanted me on board is because I have kind of that entrepreneurial background that they thought would add much more value to the founders, um, non-capital value to the founders that will eventually help the portfolio succeed. So advice is, I have learned a lot about how VC, like how funds work, how fundraising for funds work, and like, what kind of LPs invest into these kinds of funds, all this stuff. But which was interesting. But if you like working with founders like genuinely and kind of like connecting to founders, and you would like to see them succeed, I think definitely you want to work in early stage VC, especially
Mhm,
if you've been a founder before.
mhm,
I think by the way, I think that's very sound advice, because I think also the opposite is also true. Later stage VCs have different mechanisms. Like
Yeah,
there's different things that make them successful.
yeah,
And and a lot of these things are not, they might be even counterintuitive to founders, to people with like
yeah. I
you
mean,
don't get it from experience, entrepreneurial experience. You get it from VC
yeah,
experience.
yeah. And what I've only been doing this for like 2 years, so I'm still learning. But one thing that I am noticing is that when you're looking at like companies that are less than 6 months old, there's not a lot of data for you to go off. Like, how are you going to decide whether company A is better than company B? There's not a lot of quantitative data that you have access to make these kind of decisions. You don't have like a a balance sheet or a financial record that you can look at and say, oh, this company is doing well or this company is doing not so well. It's too early to look at the quantitative data. There's a lot of qualitative data that you kind of have to consider when making investments. Like that's why you meet the founders. You kind of want to poke around as to what their motivations are, why they're doing this, what they did before, how the founders, if there's a team, like how the founding team members work together, and like kind of the process that they've been going through over the past 6 months to kind of understand how they think, understand what their motivations are, understand whether or not you think they are a very strong team that's able to execute on what they're actually pitching, right? So it's kind of a little bit of an art, which I'm still learning. But yeah, it has been an interesting journey so far.
Hey, we can talk for hours, but we're coming up like a
Mhm.
1 hour mark
Yeah.
already. So let's kind of wrap this one up for now. Just one final question that we ask our guests.
Mhm.
If you can go back to your 20-year-old self, and then you're like, looking at that person, what would be like one advice that you will give him?
First of all, again, we've been talking about this all day long.
Yeah.
There's no right or wrong answer to approaching a problem.
So did you not know that when you were 20?
Yeah, no, I thought there was, I thought like, Steve Jobs built like a successful company because he went through these kind of steps. It's like, do
Oh,
I
I
have to
see.
follow that guy? There's Bill Gates. Okay, Bill Gates went through this. Do I have to follow that guy? And then you look at the other Korean like entrepreneurs here. It's like, oh, like that guy did it this way. Then is that how I'm supposed to do it? So when I was like 20 something, there was a lot of anxiety as to whether or not I'm doing it right or wrong. And I guess it kind of came from, I don't know, maybe lack of experience, or how I grew up as a Korean kid, in like going through puberty and my teen years in Korea. That's kind of how you're educated. Like there's a right and wrong answer
I think it'd be like a
for almost
general,
everything.
I think it'd be like a general thing, right? Like when you're
Mhm.
young, and that reminds me of a very interesting conversation I had recently with Gen Z, and she's not
Yeah.
Korean, and she's
Mm.
here, but she said these days, because of probably social media, like you
Yeah.
see a very like clear examples of like roles, and like people like play certain roles. If you're like a tech person, you're like, hey,
Mhm.
graduate from computer science and get a job at Google. A lot of people actually
Mhm.
vlog it, and then like there's like a certain types of people in
Yeah.
the society, and then as a young person, there's some pressure to kind of fit into those roles. So you're like, hey, you
Right.
get to think about what roles do I need to play, what is the like what is the shape that I need to kind of like be seen as, right? So I think
Mhm.
there's like typically some peer pressure about what kind of molds I need to kind of fit into, especially when you're young. Yeah.
I think that would definitely play a role too. I mean, because when I was younger, I also had other friends that were, founders and doing their own thing. So definitely it's like, like I should, I don't know. It's like, I kind of feel like I should be doing something opposed to me thinking really deep and hard as to deciding whether or not to do something and not do something. So like uh, more internalizing the feedback instead of just like blindly following one thing over the other is definitely feedback that I would give myself. I don't know if that kind of anxiety is higher for like kids that are Gen Z or maybe younger, but it's your business, right? And if you started a business because you wanted to be your own boss, then part of becoming your own boss is kind of making your own decisions and not allowing other people to make those decisions for you, because who are you going to blame after that, right?
Exactly.
Mhm.
If you fail, you might as well
Mm.
fail by your own hands, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Good stuff. Good stuff. No, yeah, really enjoyed the conversation here, and thank you again, so much for your time.
Yep.
Any call to action for people who might be interested in Antler program? I know you guys are doing, wait, is it second
Yeah.
batch now or third batch?
This is the third batch is going on now. The fourth batch is going to start next spring. So if you're in Korea, you can apply to our Korean program, or if you're located anywhere else in the world, there's probably an Antler program near you. So you just have
Yeah,
to
yeah.
What's the deadline? What's the deadline for application?
uh, So for Korea, we're probably gonna continue to get applications until February or March of next year. It's always good to apply early because you tend to get a lot of applications near the end deadline, and it's kind of hard for us to like look through all of the applications.
Ah,
So if you apply early, you can we'll actually tell you if you made the cut early. But
ah.
if you apply early, we have a lot more time to kind of digest and like, spend
Ooh,
time to talk with the candidates. So,
that's a
and
great
this is
tip.
again,
Ah, unfair
same for
advantage.
any other location.
Mhm.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, people, please do check out the Antler program. I mean, Jiho is amazing, and this is your chance to get to spend more time, in person with Jiho. So yeah, please do check it out. Yeah, so with that, let's wrap it up. Thank you so much, and this has been really good stuff. Thank you.
Thanks, Gio.
Yeah, thanks for having me. That was great. See you later.